Welcome back to the Metabolic Revolution podcast. I'm Dr. Steve Presciutti, and today I'm about to expose the most dangerous lie in modern nutrition, a lie so pervasive that millions of people are literally shrinking their organs while thinking they're being healthy. We're talking about the Minnesota Starvation Experiment and what it reveals about the hidden epidemic destroying bodies across America. What if I told you that eating 1,500 calories, what millions consider a sensible diet, could shrink your liver by half, make your intestines so thin you could read through them, and reduce your heart to 70% of its normal size? What if I told you this isn't speculation, but documented science from the most important nutrition study ever conducted? What if I told you that the eating patterns promoted by today's biggest health influencers would have been considered torture in 1944? Before we dive into this bombshell, quick reminder. This podcast is educational content only, not medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare provider before making changes to your health routine. Though honestly, after what you're about to learn, you might want to find a provider who actually understands what starvation does to the human body. This is our deep dive into the Minnesota Starvation Experiment, and we're going to spend the next 3 episodes completely revolutionizing how you think about food, metabolism, and what it really means to be healthy. Today we're exposing the organ destruction that happens when you don't eat enough food. Next week we'll reveal the metabolic crash that persists for years and why your so-called broken metabolism is actually trying to save your life. And in our final episode, we'll give you the roadmap to recovery that could save your life. Let me tell you about Sarah, 28 years old, fitness influencer with 100,000 followers. She came to me eating 1,200 calories a day, promoting it as healthy living to her audience. She had severe digestive issues that kept her housebound, hair falling out in clumps, and hands so cold she couldn't type without gloves. Her morning temperature was 96.4 degrees. That's hypothermia territory. This woman was literally dying while teaching others to do the same thing. But Sarah's story gets worse. She'd been eating this way for 3 years. 3 years of what she called clean eating, what her followers called inspiration, and what science calls starvation. She was proud of her discipline, proud of her willpower, proud that she could survive on so little food. Meanwhile, her body was cannibalizing itself to keep her alive. Here's what Sarah didn't know, what her followers didn't know, and what the entire fitness industry refuses to acknowledge. In 1944, researchers at the University of Minnesota conducted an experiment that would be considered torture today. They took 36 healthy young men and fed them 1,570 calories a day for 24 weeks. Not water fasting, not some extreme protocol. 1,570 calories, more than what Sarah was eating, more than what millions of women eat every single day. The results were so horrifying that this experiment could never be repeated. It would never pass an ethics review board. But the data exists, and it's the most comprehensive documentation of what happens when humans don't eat enough food. And here's the terrifying part. What these researchers called starvation, we now call healthy eating. The Minnesota Starvation Experiment wasn't designed to study weight loss. It was designed to understand how to refeed concentration camp survivors and famine victims after World War II. These researchers needed to know what happens to the human body during starvation and how to bring people back from the brink of death. What they discovered should be required reading for every doctor, every nutritionist, and every person who's ever been told to eat less. But first, let me paint you a picture of what we're dealing with today. Yesterday, I spent an hour scrolling through Instagram, looking at what health influencers are promoting as normal eating. One animal-based influencer was showcasing her daily meals, 174 calories total. Another was promoting 1,250 calories as sustainable nutrition. A third was bragging about eating 1 meal a day, totaling maybe 1,400 calories. These aren't extreme dieters. These are people with massive followings, teaching others that near starvation is the path to health. And it's not just the influencers. Walk into any doctor's office as a woman and you'll be handed a 1,200 calorie meal plan. Download any fitness app and it'll recommend 1,400 calories for weight loss. Pick up any women's magazine and you'll find articles about how to survive on less food. Google healthy meal plan for women and you'll find page after page of starvation protocols disguised as wellness. We've normalized starvation and called it wellness. We've pathologized normal human hunger and called it lack of discipline. We've created a world where eating enough food to support basic organ function is considered excessive, indulgent, or lacking willpower. Now, if you're ready to understand what's really happening to your body when you follow these protocols, our Energy Reset Essentials mini course breaks down the complete science of cellular energy production and why adequate calories are non-negotiable for health. For just $39, you get the exact framework we use to help people escape the starvation trap, including the minimum calorie calculations that actually support organ function. You can find that at energy.biosparkhealth.com. But let's get back to what happened to those 36 men in Minnesota. These weren't sick people. They weren't overweight. They were healthy college students and conscientious objectors who volunteered for science. They started the experiment at normal weight, eating around 3,000 calories a day, which, by the way, was considered normal for men in the 1940s. Then, for 24 weeks, they were restricted to 1,570 calories daily, along with walking 22 miles per week. Here's what's absolutely mind-blowing about this. In the 1940s, 3,000 calories was considered standard for men. For women, the recommendation was around 2,500 calories. Today we tell women that 1,200 calories is appropriate for weight loss, and 2,000 is maintenance. We've literally cut recommended calorie intake in half over the past 80 years, and we wonder why chronic disease is skyrocketing. Within weeks of starting the restriction, everything started falling apart. But not in the way you might expect. Yes, they lost weight, but where that weight came from will shock you. 33% of their weight loss came from muscle tissue. Not fat, muscle, including the most important muscle in their body, their heart. Here's where it gets truly terrifying. The heart didn't just slow down, it physically shrank by 30%. 30%. The stroke volume, the amount of blood pumped with each heartbeat, decreased proportionally. Imagine your car engine shrinking by a third and trying to power the same vehicle. That's what happens to your cardiovascular system when you don't eat enough food. But the heart was just the beginning. Their liver, the organ responsible for over 500 metabolic functions, shrank to 54% of its normal size, more than half gone. Think about what this means. Your liver detoxifies hormones, processes nutrients, maintains blood sugar, produces bile for fat digestion, synthesizes proteins, stores vitamins and minerals. How is it supposed to do any of this when it's been reduced to half its size? It can't. And this is why people following low-calorie diets have hormonal chaos, blood sugar crashes, and feel poisoned by their own bodies. The researchers also documented fatty infiltration of the liver. The organ became filled with fat deposits as it struggled to function with inadequate energy. Sound familiar? Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is now epidemic, affecting 1 in 4 adults. We blame it on sugar, on processed food, on everything except the most obvious cause, chronic energy deficiency forcing the liver to store fat instead of processing it properly. The kidneys shrank to 75% of normal size. These are the organs responsible for filtering your blood, maintaining electrolyte balance, producing hormones that regulate blood pressure. When they shrink, everything goes haywire. Blood pressure drops, electrolyte imbalances occur, waste products accumulate. The men in the study experienced frequent urination, especially at night, and an insatiable thirst despite drinking large amounts of water. The spleen, crucial for immune function, dropped to 52% of normal size. The thymus gland, which produces T cells for immune defense, completely atrophied, completely disappeared. These men became walking immune disasters, susceptible to every infection, unable to mount proper inflammatory responses. Sound like anyone you know who's always getting sick despite eating clean and exercising regularly? But perhaps most disturbing of all was what happened to their digestive system. The intestinal walls became so thin that researchers noted you could literally read print through them. The muscle fibers in the stomach wall showed marked atrophy and degeneration. Extreme atrophy of all layers of the intestinal wall occurred. The digestive tract essentially wasted away. Think about this for a moment. Every person struggling with gut health, leaky gut, food intolerances, chronic bloating, gastroparesis, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. How many of them are eating enough food? How many have been told their digestive issues are about food sensitivities when they're actually about organ shrinkage from chronic undereating? The digestive system requires enormous amounts of energy to function, producing stomach acid, digestive enzymes, moving food through the intestines via peristalsis, maintaining the intestinal barrier, supporting the gut microbiome. All of this requires energy. When you don't eat enough food, your body shuts down these non-essential functions to preserve energy for vital organs like the brain and heart. I had a client, Jennifer, who'd been to 12 different specialists for her digestive problems. Gastroenterologists, functional medicine doctors, naturopaths, everyone had a different theory. Food sensitivity testing showed she was reactive to 37 different foods. Elimination diets made her symptoms worse. Expensive supplements, probiotics, digestive enzymes, gut healing protocols, nothing worked. Her symptoms kept getting worse. When I asked about her food intake, she was proud to tell me she ate very clean, about 1,300 calories a day. She'd been eating this way for 5 years, ever since her divorce when she decided to get her life together. She thought she was being healthy, disciplined, taking care of herself. We didn't change a single food. We didn't eliminate anything. We slowly, carefully increased her calories to 2,400 over 6 months. Her digestive issues completely resolved. Not because we found the magic supplement or identified the problem food. Because we gave her organs enough energy to function. Her stomach started producing adequate acid again. Her intestinal walls thickened and healed. Her gut bacteria normalized because they finally had enough substrate to thrive. Her food sensitivities disappeared because her immune system wasn't in constant crisis mode, all because she started eating enough food to support basic organ function. This is the hidden epidemic nobody's talking about. Millions of people are walking around with shrunken organs, thinking their symptoms are genetic, or autoimmune, or just bad luck. Meanwhile, they're following eating patterns that would have been considered torture in 1944. And here's what makes this even more insidious. The fitness industry has convinced us that these symptoms are normal parts of getting lean. Hair loss? That's just genetics. Digestive issues. You need more probiotics. Cold hands and feet. Poor circulation. Irregular periods. Hormonal imbalance. Brain fog. You need more coffee. Constant infections. Your immune system is weak. Number. These are starvation symptoms, and they're completely preventable by eating enough food. The Minnesota researchers documented every horrifying detail. They measured everything. Organ weights at autopsy from concentration camp victims showed the same patterns. Heart reduced to 80% of normal. Liver at 54%, kidneys at 75%. The human body responds to energy restriction in predictable, measurable ways. But wait, it gets worse. Remember, these men were only in this state for 24 weeks, 6 months. Most people I see have been chronically undereating for years, some for decades. What do you think happens to organs that have been energy starved not for 6 months, but for 6 years? For 16 years? For 26 years? I see women in their 40s who've been dieting since they were teenagers. 30 years of chronic restriction. 30 years of organ shrinkage. 30 years of metabolic suppression. And they wonder why they feel terrible, why they can't lose weight, why their bodies seem to be falling apart. For those who are ready to take this seriously and want comprehensive support breaking free from the starvation mindset, our Bioenergetic Reset program provides everything you need. Monthly group coaching calls where we address the psychological aspects of eating more food, customized meal plans that actually support your organs, supplement protocols that work synergistically with adequate nutrition, and a community of people successfully restoring their metabolism. At $133 a month, it costs less than what most people spend on supplements that are trying to fix problems caused by not eating enough food. You can learn more at biosparkhealth.com/reset. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. You might be thinking, but Dr. Steve, these influencers look healthy, they're lean, they have energy, they seem fine. Here's what you're not seeing. You're seeing the honeymoon phase, the period where stress hormones are compensating for inadequate nutrition, where adrenaline and cortisol are keeping someone functional despite organ shrinkage. The men in the Minnesota study didn't collapse immediately either. For the first few weeks, they maintained their energy through sheer willpower and stress hormone production. But stress hormones aren't sustainable. Eventually, the system crashes. The adrenals burn out. The thyroid downregulates. The entire endocrine system goes into survival mode. I've seen it hundreds of times. The fitness competitor who dominates for 2 years then can't get out of bed. The influencer who promotes fasting then disappears for months with mysterious health issues. The biohacker who optimizes everything except the most basic requirement for human health: adequate food. Sarah, the influencer I mentioned earlier, is a perfect example. For 3 years, she maintained her physique on 1,200 calories. Her followers thought she was the picture of health. Behind the scenes, she was falling apart. Chronic infections because her immune system was compromised. Severe anxiety because her brain wasn't getting enough glucose. Insomnia because her body was in constant stress mode. Digestive issues that kept her housebound because her intestinal walls had thinned to the point of dysfunction. Her hair was falling out in clumps, but she told her followers it was just seasonal shedding. Her hands and feet were constantly cold, but she blamed poor circulation. Her periods had stopped completely, but she convinced herself it was because she was so lean and athletic. Every symptom had an excuse, a rationalization, a way to avoid confronting the obvious truth. She wasn't eating enough food to sustain human life. When we started working together, the first thing we did was throw out her food scale. The second thing was to slowly, carefully increase her food intake, not to 2,000 calories, not to 2,500, to 3,200 calories a day. And you know what happened? She lost weight. Real weight, fat weight, while eating more food than she'd eaten in years. How is this possible? Because we restored her organ function. We gave her liver enough energy to process hormones properly. We gave her thyroid enough fuel to regulate metabolism. We gave her digestive system enough resources to actually absorb nutrients. We gave her adrenals a break from constantly producing stress hormones. When your organs work, your body works. But the transformation wasn't just physical. Sarah got her personality back. Her creativity returned. She started laughing again, something her husband said he hadn't heard in years. She had energy to play with her kids instead of just surviving each day. She could think clearly, make decisions, feel emotions fully instead of living in a constant fog of survival mode. This brings us to the most important point of today's episode. The Minnesota Starvation Experiment proves that the human body has a minimum energy requirement for basic organ function. This isn't about weight loss or weight gain. This is about survival. When you eat below this threshold, your body starts breaking down its own tissues to keep you alive. And here's the kicker. That threshold is much higher than anyone wants to admit. The researchers estimated that healthy adults need a minimum of 44 to 48 calories per kilogram of body weight just for basic metabolic functions. For a 130-pound woman, that's 2,600 to 2,900 calories. Not for weight loss. For basic survival. Let me repeat that because it's crucial. A 130-pound woman needs 2,600 to 2,900 calories just to support basic organ function. Not to be active, not to exercise, not to build muscle, just to keep her organs from shrinking. Yet we live in a world where eating 2,600 calories is considered excessive for women, where fitness professionals recommend 1,200 calories for fat loss, where eating enough food to support your organs is labeled as lacking willpower or discipline. This is medical gaslighting on a massive scale. We've pathologized normal human energy requirements and normalized starvation symptoms. We've created a generation of people who are literally afraid to eat enough food to keep their organs functioning. The historical context makes this even more disturbing. In the 1940s, the U.S. government had campaigns encouraging people to eat more food, more calories, more protein, more nutrients. The focus was on abundance, on nourishment, on supporting the body's needs. Rationing during the war was seen as a necessary evil, something to be corrected as soon as possible. Today, we voluntarily ration our food and call it wellness. We celebrate restriction and demonize abundance. We've turned the temporary wartime necessity of eating less into a permanent lifestyle choice, and we wonder why chronic disease is epidemic. But here's the hope. The Minnesota researchers also documented recovery. When these men were given adequate food again, their organs began to rebuild. Their heart size increased. Their liver function improved. Their digestive system healed. The human body has an incredible capacity for regeneration when given the resources it needs. However, recovery wasn't quick. It took 58 weeks, more than a year, for these men to approach their normal weight and function. And that was after only 24 weeks of restriction. If you've been chronically undereating for years, recovery is going to take time, patience, and most importantly, the courage to eat enough food despite what the scale might do initially. The recovery process was also chaotic. The men didn't steadily improve. They had good days and bad days. Some gained weight rapidly at first, then plateaued. Others gained slowly but consistently. Some experienced edema, water retention, that lasted for months. Their bodies were desperately trying to repair the damage, and that process isn't linear or predictable. This is why our one-on-one coaching exists, for people who've been trapped in the starvation cycle for years and need personalized support to break free safely. We monitor biomarkers like temperature and pulse rate to track metabolic recovery. We adjust protocols based on your unique situation and history. We provide the accountability needed to trust the process when everything in our culture tells you to eat less. If you're ready for that level of support, you can apply at biosparkhealth.com. Let me share one more story before we wrap up. Michael, a 42-year-old executive, came to me after his wife threatened to leave him if he didn't get help. He'd been following intermittent fasting and keto for 3 years, eating 1 meal a day, around 1,400 calories. He looked lean, but he was a shell of himself. No energy for his kids, no libido, falling asleep in meetings, constant brain fog. His wife said it was like living with a zombie. He was physically present, but mentally and emotionally absent. He'd become irritable, withdrawn, obsessed with food and eating windows. Their marriage was falling apart because he'd prioritized his eating protocol over his relationships. When I explained what chronic undereating does to the brain, to hormone production, to basic human function, he broke down crying. He said nobody had ever told him that eating more could make him feel human again. He'd been so proud of his discipline, his ability to fast for 23 hours a day, his lean physique. He had no idea he was slowly destroying his body and his life. 6 months later, eating 2,800 calories a day, spread across 3 meals, he's a different person. Energy to play with his kids, mental clarity at work that led to a promotion, a libido that returned with a vengeance, a marriage that's stronger than it's been in years. His wife says she got her husband back, all because he started eating enough food to support his basic human functions. But Michael's transformation wasn't just about the calories. It was about breaking free from the obsession with restriction, about rediscovering the joy of eating, about having energy for the things that actually matter in life instead of spending all his mental energy planning his next meal or calculating eating windows. This is what the Minnesota Starvation Experiment really teaches us. It's not about weight loss or body composition. It's about what it means to be human, to have energy for the people you love, to think clearly, to feel emotions fully, to have a body that works instead of one that's barely surviving. The hidden epidemic isn't obesity. It's not diabetes or heart disease. It's millions of people walking around with shrunken organs, suppressed metabolisms, and starvation symptoms, thinking this is normal, thinking this is healthy, thinking this is the price of being lean. It's not. You don't have to choose between having a body you like and having a body that works. You don't have to sacrifice your organs for your appearance. You don't have to live in a state of chronic energy deficiency to maintain your weight. But you do have to be willing to challenge everything you've been told about nutrition. You have to be willing to eat more food than feels comfortable initially. You have to be willing to trust that your body knows how to heal when given adequate resources. The Minnesota Starvation Experiment happened 80 years ago, but its lessons are more relevant today than ever. In a world that profits from your insecurity about food, choosing to eat adequately is a radical act. Choose to nourish your organs. Choose to support your metabolism. Choose to be human. Next week, we're diving deep into the metabolic crash that happens when you don't eat enough food. We'll explore why these men's metabolism dropped by 40%, why it stayed suppressed even after they started eating more, and what this means for everyone who's ever felt like their metabolism is broken. Spoiler alert, It's not broken. It's protecting you. And understanding this could change everything about how you approach food and weight. The week after that, we'll cover the recovery protocol, the exact steps these researchers used to bring these men back from the brink of starvation, what worked, what didn't, and how to apply these lessons to your own life. Whether you're coming off years of dieting, recovering from an eating disorder, or just want to optimize your metabolism, this episode will give you the roadmap. This is Dr. Steve Presciutti, reminding you that your body is not the enemy. Your hunger is not weakness. Your need for food is not a character flaw. You are a human being with human energy requirements, and meeting those requirements isn't indulgence, it's survival. Everything discussed today is educational information only. Work with a qualified healthcare provider before making significant changes to your nutrition routine. Though honestly, finding one who understands that eating enough food is medicine might be the biggest challenge of all. We'll see you next week for part 2 of this series, where we'll expose the metabolic damage that the fitness industry calls normal and show you why your so-called broken metabolism is actually trying to save your life.